So, today is all about generation audio, but before we dive into the detail of what we did and what we found, I'm going to start with a quick bit of context to set things up and explain the reasons behind our decision to invest in this study, and specifically what we set out to explore. Now, before I go on, a bit of a spoiler alert. If you were at our tuning in event in September, some of the slides that you're about to see may feel a little bit familiar, but please bear with me because there's a lot of really interesting new stuff just a few minutes away. Now, I'm going to start by taking you on it's gone through already. I'm going to start by taking you on a brief trip down memory lane, not just to tuning in, but all the way back to 2014, when we launched our Audio Now research study that Lucy's mentioned. Now, this, against a backdrop of growth in on-demand audio services, this deep dive qualitative study set out to understand the role played by different audio formats in people's lives. And I'm sure you all remember, don't you, the research identified 6 consumer need states where audio was revealed to play an important role. And as you can see on this slide, they were broadly categorized in terms of whether the motivation for listening was personally or socially driven, or content or listener context led. Now, it's important to note here that these things aren't mutually exclusive. Content naturally plays an important role, even if the main reason for listening is context-led. Now, we're going to revisit the detail of these need states a little bit later, but one of the key headlines from the study was that rather than competing for share of ear, live radio and on-demand audio play complementary roles for listeners, helping to grow the overall audio audience. Now, a lot of water has passed under the bridge in the intervening 8 years, and let's be honest, they've hardly been uneventful, have they? So, things must have changed, right? Well, change they have, as we can see from this chart. Total commercial audio listening, as measured by Radar Midas, has continued to grow since 2014. In fact, listening hours have grown by over 20% in the last 6 years alone. Now, it's really important to note here that the data, along with all of the data you're going to see today, relates purely to commercial audio formats. That is, those services that advertisers can use to connect with audiences. So that's essentially commercial radio, non-BBC podcasts, non-paying ad-funded subscribers to streamed music services. So we're seeing a lot of growth. What's been driving this growth? Well, we found Byron Sharp's theory of how brands grow to be helpful in framing our understanding of the core drivers of growth in audio listening. Now, for those unfamiliar with his work, following years of research at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute of Marketing, Professor Sharp concluded that brand growth is driven primarily through a combination of physical and mental availability. Now, physical availability is basically related to distribution, essentially how easy it is for consumers to get their hands on whatever they need, whenever they need it. The ideal here is to always be within arm's reach of desire. At least that was always Coca-Cola's ambition. So looking specifically at audio's physical availability, we can see how the launch of the Amazon Echo in late 2016, now found in 39% of UK homes, combined with the significant increase in penetration of smartphones, as Lucy's mentioned, where 9 in 10 adults now have instant access to a pocket full of audio all within arm's reach. So these factors have helped make audio services more and more seamlessly accessible in and out of the home, wherever people are and whatever they're doing. Looking beyond the growth in new devices, another factor behind audio's growing physical availability is the increased availability of audiences to listen, I think. And this has been driven by new post-pandemic hybrid working patterns, leading to more people spending more time at home. So this is the latest data from Global's ongoing Audience Insider research, and it shows that around half of working adults are now working from home at least 1 day a week or more. And this is important because various Radiocentre research studies over the last couple of years have shown that home workers perceive radio to be the perfect accompaniment to home working. So it's clear that physical availability of audio has grown significantly in recent years, But has this also been mirrored with a shift in the mental availability of audio entertainment? Now, mental availability essentially relates to salience, or more specifically, how readily a specific brand or service springs to mind in relevant moments of need. It tends to be measured in terms of the number of reasons to choose, or needs, that are strongly associated with that brand or service. So the crucial question in this context is, how has audio's association with different need states evolved since our original 2014 study? And it's one of several threads that Generation Audio set out to explore. So we developed this project to get a better understanding of the drivers behind the growing generation of audio listening. Specifically, we wanted to review those 2014 need states, understand if they'd evolved and how, and this time we set out to quantify the size of each and get an understanding of how this varies across the week and by audience demographics. And within each need state, we also wanted to understand the scale of listening to individual audio services and the different opportunities that each of those present for advertisers. And in doing all of this, we hope to get some idea of what might shape the future of audio listening and advertising. Now, following a competitive pitch, way back in 2019, early 2020, we appointed independent research company Differentology to deliver against these objectives. So, here to explain what they did and what they found out, please welcome Differentology's Mark James, Matt Picton, and Mari Lowe. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark, and good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here, first of all. What I'm going to do today, as we can see from the slides in terms of methodology, you're going to hear from me in fairly heavily broken Geordie English exactly what we did and how we went about it. So, as a quick introduction, my name's Mark James. I run the research team here at Differentology. Worked on this project alongside the lovely Matt and Mari. And when it comes to research, there's really two things that we love more than anything. First one is understanding human behavior, and in this case, what really drives that audio listening. And the second thing is having a really big, robust data set to play with. We're all data geeks at the end of the day, and we just love to get our hands on some cool data and play around with it. And thankfully, working on this project alongside Radiocentre, we got the opportunity to do both of those things. So let's dive straight into the detail. The first thing that we wanted to do was understand any changes in audio listening since 2014, as Mark and Lucy have nicely set up. And the obvious thing is, have those need states that we identified back in 2014, how have they evolved? Have they changed at all? So we started off recruiting some lovely respondents, like the ones you can see on the screen there. No children in the audience today, just adults. But really cute little kid, as you'll see on some videos. We've got a few videos that just intersect with some of the research that we're going to present, just to break it up a little bit. And as Lucy mentioned, we've also invited some lovely panelists along today. So they're going to join us on stage, and you'll get to have a live Q&A and see a little bit about what they think about audio rather than just us researchers. So in terms of what we specifically did, we started off with what we call a qual autoethnography study. And to explain that in a little bit more detail, we recruited 20 people, some of whom are here today. They were broadly representative of Radar Midas, and we asked them to do a 1 week long exercise. Every time they listened to audio, we wanted them to fill out a video diary blog. The kind of questions that we got them to ask was, what are you listening to? Who are you with? How did you feel at that point in time? And so on. And that actually generated over 7 hours of rich video footage. So again, as a data geek, huge amount of video footage just to trawl through. And from an analysis perspective, that really helped us just to uncover all the different reasons that people listen to audio. But we didn't stop there. Once we had a good understanding from the qual, what we wanted to do was go on and do a much larger quant version of the diary. So the qual fed into that follow-on quant diary study. Again, it was a 1 week long diary study. And the idea behind the quant was really to size some of the numbers. I think one of the things from 2014 that we didn't have was some numbers to put on the great qualitative work that we did back then. So this session that we're going to take you through is all about sizing those need states and looking at different audio formats. And to be honest, it was a huge exercise. We actually recruited over 1,000 people, so really robust. And again, there was 1,000 respondents who were all specifically matched to the Midas profile. And again, that produced a huge data set. So we had over 11,000 listening occasions and almost 500,000, that's 500,000 commercial listening minutes to go on and analyse. So similar to the qual, every time that someone listened to audio over the course of that week, they filled out a diary entry there and then in the moment so we could capture exactly what was going on at that point in time. What you can see on the screen behind me are the 9 key questions that we asked. So the kind of things we were looking for were what were people listening to, who were they with, what were they doing at the time, where were they, what device were they using, and so on. Big data set. One of the most important things that we wanted to capture as part of our data collection and analysis was really to unpack mood and understand the impact of mood on our data set. And that's where the methodology got a little bit more sexy. So we used an AI semantic analysis tool, which all sounds rather grand. In essence, what we did was analyze the huge volume of responses that we got, and we were able to identify from that, using our semantic artificial intelligence, all the different moods and emotions that people experienced at different points in time, at different listening moments. So I think Mark's going to tell you a little bit more about the importance of mood towards the end of the presentation. But just bear in mind, as Matt and Maury take you through the slides, keep an eye on some of the different moods that you can see within the different audio need states. So that's the methodology. In short, big, huge, robust study. So now back to the story that Mark started with at the start of the presentation. Mark's already explained a little bit about physical availability. I'm not going to dwell on that too much, but essentially that's how new technologies increase the availability of audio for all of us as listeners. As researchers, what we were more interested in on the right-hand side of that is actual mental availability. Mark's already talked a little bit about terminology. Byron Sharp uses confusing terms like category entry points and various different things. If you want to boil that down to the essentials, it's essentially why do people listen? What are the cues that they look for? And what context or specific benefits does audio provide? And to understand all of that and unpack it, we really need to revisit some of those audio need states. So over at Matt and Maury, they're going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of all the different audio need states that we found and how they've evolved since 2014.
Thank you, Mark. Myself and Mari are going to tag team this just so you don't get bored of one of us, because there's 7 need states to go through, and we'll take each one in turn. For those of you who were listening and paying attention earlier to Mark's presentation, back in 2014, there were, and if you can count very simply, 6 need states. But obviously a lot has changed in that time between 2014 and 2022. And one of the key aspects of what we're trying to understand is, has this evolved or does this remain the same in 2022, post-COVID, post-pandemic, and everything that entailed? What we found is, and for those that can count again, there is a 7th need state emerged, which we've labelled as keep me company. What that's all about is, and I'm sure everyone in this room is broadly familiar with this if you've worked from home or hybrid work, is providing a sense of companionship and a human voice when people are kind of on their own and doing other tasks. We've now got a short video, we'll have one for each need state, where you see real people talking about how this need state manifests.
If you listen to the radio station for so long, you feel like you're comfortable with them, you're your friend, they're speaking to you. You don't really get that from your Spotifys and your Alexas.
I'm on my own, so it is quite quiet, so it's nice to have. It feels like you're in a room with other people and it livens up the atmosphere.
There's something kind of special about it that I can't quite put my finger on, but I guess you feel part of something. When I'm working from home, that can be important.
I'd rather listen to radio presenters talking about the day. Some of them can cheer you up, be quite funny, they're quite quirky.
Just keeps me company while I'm doing jobs and entertaining this little monkey.
There we go, real people. So what's this need state all about? As we heard, it provides companionship, a friend, a human voice when people are busy doing other things. If you've got small children or dictators like myself, it's a sense of, a bit of sanity of another adult voice in the room. As a result, most likely to be listening at home or in the car, this particular need state, working, studying, doing household chores, those types of things. And it's the one need state where childcare is most prominent as a context. Audio, in terms of the mood, which is top right, and Mark alluded to, really hits home in this space, and really delivering a happy, feel-good, and relaxed mood state. Despite this being a new need state, it's actually the second biggest in terms of both total listening time and weekly reach. So it's a big need state. 6 in 10 of our commercial audience are listening or engaging in this need state on a weekly basis. And it'll be no surprise to find that presenter-led live radio is the dominant audio format for both younger and older. The human voice and the synchronicity of something only live radio can deliver. So that's the new kid on the block, if you remember those, you're as old as me. We'll now run through the other need states in turn, and I'll hand over to Mari to take the next one.
Cool, so we're going to be talking about Help Me Escape first, and I think just to start it off, it probably makes sense just to show you guys the video, because I think it explains it really well, to be honest.
I've had a bit of a stressful day today, so I want to listen to the radio just to decompress and zone out.
We've had graduation all day, so it's been really busy and hot and exhausting. So I was listening to a feel-good radio station. I particularly enjoy Heart 2000s as it's quite an upbeat radio and it's a form of escapism after a long day of work.
Easy listening helps me to relax, a bit of time for me to be on my own and unwind.
You want to listen to some music, remind you of the past, happier times, so we'll say.
So I'm listening to a film interview with a hot chocolate or a cup of tea, but this is my time to de-stress, and it's just a nice environment.
It's just perfect for what I need. Gentle, soothing music in combination with the gentle, soothing garden and nature.
Cool, so basically, as we heard, this is a need state that's really about relaxation. It's finding that safe space for yourself. It's finding that sanctuary that you can really escape from the world for a bit. And actually, specifically, because we're talking about audio, it's about using audio as a buffer to do that from the outside world. I think this stuff already makes sense, so we're talking about where it is. At home, it's one of those spaces that you're able to just take that time for yourself, relax after such a busy day, a stressful day, and just avoid all those frustrations you really don't want to be thinking about. The other place that we see it being quite prevalent is in commuting, in the car, public transport, when you're traveling. Again, when you probably do want that bit of buffer from you and the outside world and the baby that's crying 2 carriages down or whatever that noise is that's really frustrating in that moment, you're able to just get away to a bit of a familiar space and use audio to really do that. In terms of who you're doing it with, it is often quite a solitary thing, maybe yourself, maybe you and a partner, but that's really it in a nutshell. It's about escaping that stress, which is why it makes sense that when we're looking at that mood that we talked about earlier, relaxation, that's where we're seeing this sit. It's really about relaxation, taking that space away for yourself. When we're talking about how big this is, so it's 10% of share of total listening time. So that means it's kind of in the middle. It's not quite as big as the last one. It's not one of the bigger ones, but it's also not one of the smaller ones. About 1 in 3 people are using audio to meet that need on a weekly basis. So it's still quite a relevant thing that we see a lot of people doing. And then coming to what channels we're looking to meet that need. When we have a look at this, we can actually see that live radio is really still dominating amongst both age groups, that all adults and that 15 to 34-year-olds. And actually, live radio is a really easy way to do that. It's a really good way to instantly create that buffer between yourself and the rest of the world. You don't have to put a lot of work in it. You turn it on and you're there. You've got that space. And yeah, thinking about what live radio gives you, it's that familiarity, familiar music. You can curate which channel you're listening to really find that safe space for yourself. So I'm going to hand back over to Matt for the next one, moving more into that context space, slightly more social, slightly less solitary.
So yeah, lift my mood. It's kind of self-explanatory in the video, I think we'll do this justice, but it's about that moment when we need a little bit of energy, hopefully not right now in the room, you all look awake, that little bit pick me up and sort of get up and go.
really spurs me on. It keeps me positive. It keeps me in a good mood. It keeps me going, especially when it comes to training.
It makes me want to keep going, push further, push harder.
I don't know what it is, but the radio presenters that I listen to, they have amazing energy that cannot be replaced. They play good music. It gets me going in the morning.
The sort of music I'd be listening to now would be the type of thing that would keep me motivated to overall lift my spirits.
I've got a late night working to meet a deadline. It's upbeat and it will keep me motivated and energised whilst I'm working.
I normally switch on my Spotify because it just literally just keeps my mood high.
It just calms me down, it relaxes me, uplifts me, and it's going to put me in a good mindset.
When I do start feeling a bit down in the dumps, I do listen to music.
I suppose that's what all the audio does, it lifts me up. I'm not really one to listen to sad stuff when I feel sad. I always listen to positive things, really.
So really easy to get a sense of this need state. And when audio is being used as kind of pick-me-up, a bit of kind of motivator, listeners are typically engaged in other things. So it's not necessarily primary, the listening is not necessarily primary in nature. So things like household chores, working, and it's the one need state where exercise kind of over-indexes in terms of an activity. Not like me, but I can see some fitter people in the room when, trying to push out that last rep, run that last kilometre, really helps you kind of get over that line, get over that finish line. Again, in terms of mood, audio kind of, is really FedEx-like here, delivering goods emotionally. There's happy, energized, and uplifted mood as you expect when people are in this need state. It is the biggest of all our need states, and I think the reason behind that, because audio is so easily accessible and so readily available, and whilst we're in this need state, people are kind of listening in a secondary nature and they're primarily focusing on another task, they're not dedicating that listening activity or mental activity. I think it helps explain why this is kind of the biggest need state of all of them. In terms of kind of audio type, there's a wide, with live radio, there's a wide range of stations. You can pick any type of station to meet any type of mood, any type of need, and trust it to deliver on what it is you're kind of looking for. So it makes sense that live radio, again, really prominent for this need state. There is some role for on-demand, particularly amongst the younger audience. Maybe you've got a bit more time, willingness to put together a curated kind of playlist for certain events or certain activities, which is obviously much easier today than it was back in the 1990s with me doing a mixtape via the Radio 1 playlist or countdown. So we'll now move on to some of the more social need states. Sorry, to go back.
Oh no, go for it.
It's familiar to put the radio on when my mum's round, and that probably makes me feel connected to my mum. If I want to put some stuff on that's going to be okay for everyone, I might put the radio on. Just a mixture of stuff that you feel like everyone's going to like.
It can bring people together. It basically allows for a good time to be even better, or a not so good time to be better, simple as.
Music just makes playing games more fun. It just puts everyone in a good mood.
Just walking with a friend towards where our other friends are, just listening to some tunes on my phone, getting into the vibe of the night, excited for what's to come.
And it can also help to set the tone for, having a dinner party, having like a car sing-along like what we were doing earlier.
I've just been listening to Alexa with my two boys. We've been choosing songs off it and it's been really nice and fun. And we've also listened to some songs to get ideas of what to request for my sister's wedding.
If I'm doing preparing some orders at work with a work colleague, brings us together, especially if it's a song that we can both relate to.
So this moment is about amplify the moment. It's about using audio to kind of just make things even better. So it's really social in nature. You'll notice from the icons in the corner, lots of people there. It's really a getting together moment. And actually this is one where we see the setting is really dictated by that context. So at work, at home, in the car, whenever that moment is, when you're with other people and you just want to kind of just make it a better moment, enjoy it more. When we're talking about kind of the mood that people are in, it's kind of happy, feel good, relaxed. I think actually from the video it summed it up really well. It's about taking a good moment and making it even better, maybe even taking a not so good moment and also making that even better. Taking a situation that's, could be really average time, that long car journey that you don't really want to take, but turning it into something that's memorable, it's fun, it's memories together. And that's actually what audio has the power to do. Sorry, on to the next. When we're talking about how big it is, this again sits kind of in the middle of the pack, so around sort of 11% share of total listening time. But again, 1 in 3 people roughly are using audio to meet that need on a weekly basis. It's also actually the longest listening time, and that's probably down to it being those social occasions where you've got other things going on, but it is one of the longer listening occasions that we've measured. Right, you'll be sick of hearing me say this, but live radio, again, does dominate in this space. And we can see actually it's to a really high proportion for both all adults and that younger age group. When we're thinking about why that is, live radio is really easy. I turn it on, no one's judging me for my choice. I don't get asked to turn off my playlist like I did the other week in the car by my sister-in-law. It was a very awkward car journey, but you don't have that jeopardy, you don't have that risk of anyone judging you. You just turn it on. If it's something good, you will like it. If it's not, you wait for the next song. You do again see that kind of leaning towards, for the younger group, that leaning towards a bit more of that on-demand music, that kind of streaming where you can maybe have a more curated experience, but we still see that live radio dominating. I'm going to hand over back to Matt again, moving more into that content side of the circle that you'll see. Go for it.
So yeah, the other social need state is providing social currency. So a little bit of detail info to have those kind of water cooler moments or discussions at home, some of which you might win.
Anything that happens, anything that you hear on the radio can spark that gossip. It all kind of just fits together and snowballs from the point of remembering something, what we've just heard on the radio.
It can just spark any kind of conversation, so talk about Harry Styles.
I prefer Niall and Zayn.
Yeah.
Their solo songs after One Direction.
Oh,
yeah.
no, Zayn's a traitor.
He's been telling the BBC's John Wilson about his memories of the Beatles.
But do you think if the Beatles were a thing now, people would like them as much?
Popular music wouldn't be what it is now if the Beatles weren't a thing.
I disagree with that, but I don't know if I'm just biased.
I wanted to take this opportunity to listen to the new Beyonce song. She hasn't released music in quite a while, so I wanted to join in on the reactions and what I thought of it and be able to discuss it with my family and friends.
So this need state, providing social currency, is the content-led sister of Amplify the Moment. Audio providing listeners with things to talk about, spark conversation. As with Amplify the Moment, it's a shared listening occasion, so lots of people, 4 lads on a drunk night out, I think, at the end there. And the shared listening occasion, the setting for listening here is dictated by the social situation. Home and work are prevalent, along with shared car journeys. Audio delivers in this sense in terms of a really heightened positive mood and also uplifting. In terms of size, this is the smallest need state. So it is quite small with the lowest kind of weekly reach. But similar to Amplify the Moment, it actually has the second longest kind of engagement time or average length of engagement occasion. There we go. Radio does dominate for the majority, for a total kind of sample, or all adults, and with an eclectic mix of content, so radio offering presenter chat, news, weather, music available, there's lots that it provides to talk about, so it's not surprising that radio leads the way. Among the younger audience, it is notable that podcasts do start to play a slightly larger role in this particular need state. So they work in parallel with radio to really reach kind of this need state. We've only got 2 more, so bear with us.
Cool, so into Broaden My Horizons. So this is more about that discovery. It's really about that discovery moment, finding something new that kind of excites you.
on the radio you hear kind of new music or things perhaps I wouldn't listen to.
Different programmes on KISS play up and coming songs from less known artists, and you think, oh, I really like that. You wouldn't normally go out of your way to listen to that kind of music.
It's just nice to know, like she's just said there, I believe this is the new song from Paolo Nutini, which is really good because that'll again help me in the future for knowing, oh yeah, he's got a new song out, let's listen to that. I mean, it is really good for knowing what's going on here and there.
I'd heard about podcasts through the radio, but it was kind of something I explored by myself. Look for my own on Spotify and on other platforms. And podcasts were actually really helpful for me, like helping me to learn more about my job and about the industry that I'm in.
I've suffered myself with a fair bit of mental health issues. I understand how you're not alone, there are other people like that, and you hear their ways of dealing with it, or whether they were helped to deal with it.
When I listen to the radio, I come away feeling more informed about something, but when I listen to a podcast, I come away feeling not enlightened, but something similar to that, like discovered a new way of thinking.
Podcasts and radio opened me up to new ideas.
So as we heard people talk about there, this is really about the role of audio in introducing people to new topics of interest. Maybe it's a new perspective on something that you're already aware of, new music. There are it's a broad range of content really that people are finding and discovering. I think one of the things that you really hear come through is it's that sort of serendipity, that thing that you wouldn't necessarily have gone to listen to, but actually you came across it, you heard it, and actually it's just enriched your life a bit. I think, for example, one of the things I find often happens to me when I'm listening to the radio is I'm listening to a song. It's an artist that I would never have chosen to listen to, but actually I enjoy it. I look it up later and I discover that I'm, finding new things, broadening my horizons. So when we're talking about how we're doing that, it's really kind of a solitary thing. It's mainly alone that we've got the space to be able to do that. We're talking about what we're doing at the same time. I think it's quite interesting. We see hobbies come in for this one, and I think that actually just reflects that broad range of kind of new things that you might be discovering. Actually, that's something you can do at the same time as a number of different things, as well as, relaxing, browsing the internet. Talking about where it is often at home, where you've got that space to do it. But also, when you're on the move, when you're commuting, when you're traveling somewhere, it's using that time for something that feels useful. When we're talking about how big this is a smaller need state, so it's just slightly bigger than the last one we heard about, just a little bit bigger, 1%. So it's quite a narrow slice of that listening time kind of pie. But when we're looking at how many people are doing that weekly, it's 1 in 7. So it's still a fair amount of people who are using audio to meet that need on a regular basis. I think this is a really interesting chart because you've heard us say a lot about how radio is really the top provider of all of these need states. Actually, this one we see a really different pattern. We see podcasts really taking over as kind of the place people are generally going to get this. And I think that's probably pretty logical about why. They've got such a range and variety. If you want to go find something really specific and niche and that isn't necessarily something you need for daily life, I think when I was looking one up, there was one purely about the role of escalators in everyday life, and it is called People Movers, if anyone wants to read it or listen to it. Reading the blurb, I'm quite tempted to. But generally, you can just find what you want with a podcast. You can find something new and interesting. However, that said, we can still see live radio is still second. I think there's still that element that you hear come through from the video where people are talking about, it just introduces me to something that I wouldn't have looked for. It gives me that opportunity to hear something, and that role of human curation that you get through radio takes some of the effort out of managing to meet that need for people. So I'm going to hand back over to Matt for the last one. Just about survived all the need states, and just back up into that, keep me in the loop.
Yeah. So we're there, the 7th one, hurrah. Keep me in the loop. I'll show you the video because that will explain a lot.
I always listen to news in the morning. It is a staple in my day. It keeps me updated, it keeps me informed.
The presenters that I usually listen to talk about trendy topics and things I want to hear.
It is a big thing to why I listen to the radio, to feel kind of connected, find out what's going on, if that's good or bad.
Every hour
It'll tell us the news, and obviously quite a lot's happened in the past few days.
It's an all-round streaming service which will provide you with different aspects like news, traffic updates.
I like to be informed, I like to be updated, see what's going on in the world.
You'll get news blasts, something's happened or something like that. The difference is immense compared to pre-recording stuff.
So this final need state, keeping me in the loop, is all about keeping listeners seamlessly connected with the wider world around us. And whilst doing that, whilst kind of doing other tasks, things like household admin, childcare, commuting, those types of activities. It's mostly kind of solitary or maybe with a partner kind of present, and particularly in kind of private spaces in the home or in the car. And reflective of how the audio in this need state and content's kind of being used to connect to the outside world, it's not surprising that the dominant kind of mood is informed with a sense of also kind of being energized. In terms of size, this is actually the third largest at 12% sort of total listening share, so it's the third biggest need state, with the reach of a third of all adults, commercial listeners, engaging this need state on a weekly basis, and an average listening occasion of almost 80 minutes. With the likes of, again, on the radio, news, weather, traffic, travel, announcements, new music, it's not surprising that the radio leads kind of listening across age groups in this space. There is also a bit of a role for podcasts, playing a secondary role for this need state amongst both kind of all adults and also the younger audience. So that's all the need states. I'm now going to hand you back to the other M&M presenting today. Mark's going to talk you through, or quickly recap the need states, and then talk you through the defining characteristics of the different audio types.
Thanks very much, team. What Matt and Maury have clearly tried to do is give you a bit of an overview of the individual need states. You've already seen a lot of this data in the individual need states, but what we've tried to do on this chart is just give you a one-stop overall view of what's going on with the different need states. We can see how the 7 different versions compare against each other in terms of size. So a key thing that we've built on since 2014 is trying to understand actually how big these need states are. Clearly, as the guys have said, some are larger than others. Lift My Mood comes out on top. Not surprising, really. That's something that audio's always been famous for, being that companion who kind of lifts my mood a little bit. And that brings us on to Keep Me Company, which makes up a quarter of listening time. 2 of the smaller need states that we've seen, broaden my horizons, provide social currency. And then you've got Keep Me in the Loop, amplify the moment, and help me escape come somewhere in the middle. So that's your overview. What we thought would be quite interesting, again, just to macro out a little bit from the individual need states, is just look at a specific focus on our 3 different audio formats that we've run through. So if we look at on-demand, first of all, what we can see on this chart, we've actually ranked on-demand share of listening within each individual need state. It's actually clear from this chart that listening to on-demand music services is most prevalent in need states that center around what we're calling mood management. So you can see it's need states like lift my mood, help me escape, amplify the moment. For listeners, on-demand listening is very much about that mood management. When we look at podcasts individually, and we look at that equivalent chart, we can see they really come into their own, as Maury mentioned, for broaden my horizons, and to a lesser extent, keep me in the loop. So in other words, podcasts are mostly used when people want to learn new things and develop a much deeper understanding of a chosen topic. When it comes to live radio, straight away you can see the numbers kind of shoot towards the right-hand side, and that really clearly plays a huge role. Radio dominates a lot of these kind of need states. So at an overall level, radio really helps people to feel energized and uplifted, as well as helping them to stay connected at both social level, but also to the wider world. What we've tried to do on this chart, this is the last chart I'm going to leave you with, we try to sum up the previous 3 just to give you an idea in this kind of handy Venn diagram that we've created. It shows the different roles of our 3 different audio formats, and they've all got an individual role to play. And it's clear from our analysis that live radio, on-demand music, and podcasts all play pretty distinct but complementary roles for different listeners. So hopefully that provides you with a good overview. We've only really scratched the surface in terms of the data that we've got. As I mentioned, it's a huge data set. And I know Mark's going to come on a little bit later and tell you a little bit about what the future plans for, how we're going to release some of that kind of wider data.
Anyway, a lot of ground has been covered in the last 40 minutes, so my job in the next 10 minutes or so is to wrap up, providing a brief summary of the key takeouts and consider ways in which the learning can be executed to help generate better results from audio advertising. And the first key headline to take away is this: the audio advertising opportunity is bigger than ever. At a time when even some digital media platforms are struggling to maintain audiences, Meta, I'm looking at you, the trends from Radar Midas are clear. More people are listening to commercial audio each week, and they're listening for longer. And as of summer 2022, 75% of UK adults now listen to commercial audio services for an average of 15 hours every week. And we've explored how this audience growth has been derived from improved physical and mental availability of audio in the form of wider distribution and enhanced relevance of audio in people's lives. It's also been driven by the fact that different audio formats aren't always directly competing for share of ear, but playing complementary roles for listeners, as highlighted on this chart that Mark showed earlier. And this complementary quality of the different audio services naturally helps broaden and deepen the appeal of commercial audio entertainment for more individuals more often. The distinctive nature of live linear radio that we've explored and heard about today means that it's able to effectively serve every need state, much more so than podcast and on-demand music services. And this underpins why the medium continues to lead commercial audio listening habits. So based on the 500,000 minutes of commercial audio listening we captured during the weekly diary task, we can see in this chart how live radio has the highest weekly reach by a number of multiples, leading across all of the need states except Broaden My Horizons, within which, as we've already got a sense of, podcasts deliver the highest reach. And based on that same robust data set, we can see how live radio is also found to account for the greatest share of time spent listening within each of our need states, again with the exception of podcasts in Broaden My Horizons. Important to note here that the data is scaled in line with each need state's share of total listening time, and that's the percentages in black at the top of each column, and radio's share within each need state is highlighted in white. Now, in attaining the highest reach and share of listening within 6 of the 7 audio need states, it's clear, therefore, why live radio remains the most listened to form of audio entertainment at an overall level. And despite the needs driving listening behaviour and audio choices varying by age, Radar Midas quantifies how live radio continues to lead listening time among adults and younger audience groups. Now, the third key headline relates to the nature of commercial listening at a headline level. When we look at how share of overall time spent listening to audio breaks down, the data reveals how it's primarily driven by listener context over content, with context-led occasions accounting for over 80% of total weekly commercial audio listening time. Again, it should be noticed here that they're not mutually exclusive. Content naturally plays a vital role in context-led listening choices. However, the net effect of this is that audio entertainment provides advertisers with a multitude of opportunities to engage mass audiences at relevant moments and benefit from boosted advertising performance as a result. And we'll revisit this thinking in just a few slides. So, here's a summary of the 4 key takeouts we'd like you to take away today. I'm not going to insult you by reading them out, and also you can take a copy of the report away as well. So, having digested those key takeouts, you might now be wondering how the learning can be applied to day-to-day planning to help generate better results from audio advertising. Well, whether you're thinking that or not, I'm still going to quickly run through some ideas that we had about practical application of the findings. And as ever, a bit more context behind what framed our thinking. So we've considered the research findings within the context of the following media and contextual factors that are demonstrated by numerous research studies to influence how effectively each individual instance of advertising communicates, no matter what the medium. Now, I accept this is an exhaustive list before people start throwing brickbats at me, but I hope you'll agree that these relate quite closely to different elements that we've covered in the study today. Now, I'm going to briefly explore each in turn, but before we dive more deeply into the subjects of mood and context, let's remind ourselves about the importance of campaign reach in delivering optimum results. Now, at an overall campaign level, the long and the short of it, and I'm sure you're all familiar with it, by the dynamic duo of Les Binet and Peter Field, published by the IPA, demonstrates the importance of broad reach and strengthening emotional connection in delivering optimum advertising effects, especially for brand-building campaigns. And in another reference to the ubiquitous How Brands Grow, Professor Byron Sharp highlights the importance of communicating with all category buyers across a broad range of occasions and situations in helping to strengthen a brand's mental availability. Now, specifically from an audio perspective, Radiocentre's ROI Multiplier Big Data Radio Effectiveness Study and our Radio Planning Optimizer planning tool both established the importance of optimizing weekly reach over frequency in delivering better results from audio campaigns. It's also important in establishing the value of different media channels and environments for building reach to identify how available the audience is to be reached on a regular basis. So in this context, with weekly reach ranging from 12% up to 69%, and the average listening occasion lasting between 1 and 2 hours, each of our individual audio need states provides advertisers with a clear-cut opportunity to reach critical mass audiences and build frequency as required. And I think the importance of this ready accessibility of audio audiences is brought into sharp contrast against the backdrop of occasional digital media number wang, which they play by quoting audience sizes based on monthly active users or people who use the service for more than 0 seconds per month. And so in that context, those people who use monthly active users is not a valuable measure from an advertising perspective because they are essentially unreachable on any meaningful basis. So there we go, that's that. Got that off my chest. So make no mistake, commercial audio in general and live radio in particular provides advertisers with credible audience scale. So having established the importance of reach, let's move on to explore the significance of audience mood in advertising effectiveness, and that's been touched on across the presentation this morning. So in their article, The Role of Emotions in Marketing, published in the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, which I'm sure you will read on a regular basis, as do I, thanks to Differentology, by the way, for bringing this to my attention, the authors highlighted how mood congruence is important for brand salience, because memory encoding, and therefore securing a spot in a person's long-term memory, occurs best when the mood of the ad matches the person's mood at the time they were exposed to it. Now, the impact of radio's editorial context on audio advertising processing was explored in Radiocentre's study, The Emotional Multiplier, and this identified that radio's mood-boosting editorial effect extends into the ad break, enhancing engagement with advertising by up to 30% compared to when the ads were preceded by silence. And what about situational cues? Well, in the article, Non-Conscious Goals and Consumer Choice, which I'm sure you've all read again, which was published in the Journal of Consumer Research, the authors used behavioral economics to suggest how a brand's goals can be activated by situational cues that lead consumers to make decisions subconsciously. And I think this is particularly interesting to consider in the context of Robert Heath's theory of low attention processing, and feels especially relevant now with all of the current brouhaha about attention metrics. And there's further evidence to back this up from an audio perspective. Radiocentre's Here and Now research study revealed how audio advertising that directly relates to tasks or activities that listeners are participating in benefits from significantly higher levels of engagement and memory processing, leading to a 56% increase in spontaneous ad recall. And further analysis shows how these effects are so powerful that they can turn average ads into star performers. And developing this insight further, Radiocentre's Building Shelf Awareness study demonstrates how exposure to radio advertising just prior to the point of purchase, in this instance, in-car, on the way to the supermarket, can deliver really powerful short-term effects, helping brands to stand out more on shelf and increasing immediate purchase intent by an average of 33%. So bearing those factors in mind, what does our learning suggest we should consider implementing from a planning perspective? Well, in the best traditions of Blue Peter, and there's a cultural reference that's lost half the audience already, here are 3 ideas I prepared earlier. And here's the first. Increase audio's share of the overall media budget. Why? Well, I think we've demonstrated quite clearly today how audio is growing in importance for UK listeners of all ages, offering critical mass audiences for advertisers to engage with to drive more effective results. A whole host of evidence supporting radio's claim to be effective in delivering results across a wide range of metrics can be found on the Radiocentre website, www.radiocentre.org, but there's also specific data that demonstrates the additional effectiveness that upping radio's share of the total media budget can have on overall campaign returns. So Radiocentre's ROI multiplier study identified that raising radio's share of an advertising budget leads to a significant increase in overall campaign ROI, with an optimum share of 20% of total media budget identified within this data set. So, second thing, we've seen how live radio and on-demand services play complementary roles for the listener, but they can also do so for advertisers. So, if you're using radio for brand building or creating future demand, adding on-demand audio services into the mix can help extend campaign reach significantly, especially amongst younger audiences. And in the context of converting existing demand or driving short-term response, adding on-demand audio services into the mix can help extend campaign reach significantly. Sorry, bear with me. I just jumped ahead a paragraph. I sound a bit like Boris Johnson now, don't I? Anyway, on-demand audio can enhance targeting efficiencies alongside the activation at scale provided by radio's mass reach. So one thing is very clear from the data on this chart. If radio isn't part of your current audio strategy, then you aren't really benefiting from the full reach potential and related effectiveness that audio as a medium has to offer. And here's the third, and you'll be delighted to know the final. So explore needs states-based planning to enhance audio communication effectiveness. So we've explored the important influence that reach and mood congruence and situational cues can exert on advertising effectiveness, both generally and specifically from an audio perspective. Bearing these factors in mind when considering the specific nature of listening within each individual need state can help marketers and media planners identify which need states offer the optimal communication opportunities relating to the nature of the individual campaign being planned. And once these key need states have been identified, media planning and creative strategies can be honed accordingly to enhance overall advertising outcomes using mood or situationally congruent creative approaches. And the need states ready reckoner featured on this slide and in the printed report, if you want to take it away, and will be available online, is intended to help inform this process. But there's more planned. We're currently in the process of developing a need states navigator tool with the ambition of allowing people to explore in more depth the makeup of each need state, how different audio formats are used within it, and when and where it is most prevalent. To give you an idea, the Need States Navigator is likely to follow a similar template to our context targeter tool shown on this slide that some of you may be familiar with. Now, all being well, yes, famous last words, this should be launched in early 2013, so watch this space. So hopefully you found it interesting. This about wraps it up for today. If anyone has any questions, we're running a limited tea and coffee service in the foyer afterwards. So come and grab us for a chat then, or give us a call, drop us a line, whatever, questions crop up along the way afterwards. And I'd just like to wrap up with one final thought. We called this study Generation Audio because the data clearly demonstrates how audio is playing a much more important role within the current generation for both listeners and advertisers. And it's important for us all to understand that from an audience perspective, Generation Audio isn't just limited to a narrowly defined strata within society like millennials or Gen Z, or Gen Z as we'd say in Dartford. The research shows that really it's everybody's generation. It's yours, it's theirs, and even my generation too. So thanks for coming, everyone. See you soon.